And I feel like that's what a lot of people who are depressed need, is like someone to sit you down and say, I get you. Your feelings are valid. They are real. And I understand you. I feel the same way sometimes. And I love you and I care about you. And let's work through this together. I'd rather keep it real with you. So coming down from that moment is kind of when I started being like, I need to see a therapist again. Like, I need to talk to somebody, because this is crazy. This is crazy. This is too much. I started pushing my mom for me to see a therapist, and she just didn't want to do it. She didn't want me to see one. I was getting an allowance from making straight A's. That was kind of my mom's system of like, if you make A's, you get money, da 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 da. So I was getting this allowance, and I basically found a therapist, and I was like telling my sister like, hey, can you drive me to this therapist, and I'll have to pay the copay or whatever, to see them. And this therapist was also a white woman. And so my sister was driving me there. My mom was against it. She didn't want any part of it. She didn't want to support me in it at all. My mom was convinced that I was just shit talking her to the therapist, making her look bad. So she didn't want me to go. But my sister let me go because my sister understood, like, look, you're reaching out for help. Let's get you help. So I was seeing that therapist, which was helping a bit. And I was in high school at the time. It was helping a bit, but not as much, because similar to how the other therapist was when I was younger, she felt that I needed to see a psychiatrist. Like, I needed to actually talk to somebody who gives people medication, because these problems seem deeper than just, I'm mad about this, or I'm mad about that, or I'm sad about this. She was like, no, this is much more serious. You need to see somebody. And it took me a minute to get to that point. And so in the time it took, I don't know when I stopped seeing her, but something happened where I stopped seeing her. And in the time it took after I stopped seeing her, things just started to get worse and worse. Like, I started talking to the counselor at school. I started talking to the social worker at school. And they would say things like, oh, maybe you should journal about it. Like, they was giving me these stupid things that didn't work. I was starting to talk to my English teacher at school, who was also a white woman, and she was telling me about how her son had panic attacks, so she kind of understood mental health stuff, and so she would be kind of nice to me. Whereas the black teachers, when I would like put my head down and go to sleep in class, they thought I was just being defiant. She understood that when you're depressed, you have trouble sleeping, and you're tired all the time. So she would kind of give me the benefit of the doubt. I had reached this point where I got to the point where I couldn't eat anymore. So I got to the point where I was so depressed, I couldn't eat solid foods. And so what I would do is I would drink these juices that were like these nutrient juices or whatever to keep you alive, but I couldn't eat. Like, I couldn't make myself eat food. And at first, family looks at it because I'm fat. They look at it like, oh, you're losing weight, da 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 da. Yeah, good for you. But then they was like, wait a minute, she's not eating. And so they started to be upset about that. I started getting really manic. And I did have moments of mania throughout my life that were manifested through psychosis. So it would be through delusions. Like, I had delusions that like people were out to get me. People were trying to make me commit not alive. People were trying to force my hand in that way. People were talking about me behind my back. Everybody thought, bad things about me. So I had those kind of delusions. I never like hallucinated, like hearing voices or seeing things, but I would have those types of thoughts. And there would be moments where I would just be feeling like I'm full of energy and I'm happy, and I'd be like, great. And then I go right back down to being depressed again. So around this time when I stopped eating, I was feeling very manic. Like, my thoughts were racing constantly to the point where I couldn't speak. Or if I did try to speak, I would stutter. I was like shaking. I was very irritable. I couldn't really handle anything. Like, my threshold for stress was so low, like, I feel like I was walking around at a 10 and any little thing could set me off, because I was just so much full of like all of this anxiety, all of this stress, all of this tension, like you feel like there's a weight on your chest. Where I just couldn't handle anything. And I would have moments when I was in class in high school where I would just burst into tears, and I'd have to go to the bathroom, and I come and I sit down like I thought I was good, and then I burst into tears again, and I have to go to the bathroom. And so people around me saw it. Like, I was already getting bullied, but if people around me saw it, like, I was just crying all the time for no reason. Like, I couldn't even be tough about it either. Like, I was just like crying. I was seriously thinking about not alive. I was making all these different plans. I was like, you can do it this way, this way, this way. You could do it at school. That way no one can stop you because no one at your school likes you anyway. So I was thinking about that a lot, and I wasn't eating, and I was trying to, like, my family was, I don't know what they thought they was doing. Like, they was trying to find all these other type of remedies and stuff to help me out, other than therapy, seeing a doctor. I did have a period when I went to the children's clinic because I was still technically a child. I'm a teenager. And they straight up asked me, they was like, do you feel safe at home? And I was like, what you mean? And they was like, is there any other place that you would like to be staying right now other than your mom's house? And I was like, what you mean? And they was like, look, do you want to go somewhere else? And I was like, where would I go? You know, because in my mind, it's like, it's not like I can stay with any family members. Like, they still don't know what the hell's going on. And my mom wouldn't allow it. She wouldn't allow me to just go live with another family member. Like, no, she would hate that. So I was like, doesn't matter how I feel. I'm staying where I'm staying. Ain't nowhere else to go. Can't go to my dad's house. He trash too. So that's kind of how I reacted to them asking me that question. Like, thinking back now, I'm like, oh, that was a serious, trying to make sure I was okay. And I wasn't okay, but I didn't really know how to explain that. So then I had this moment where I got into it with my mom again. It was so stupid too. She literally was trying to black mom me because I had an attitude. I wasn't listening to her. I was doing another tunnel vision thing where I was just like dissociating, and I was just like, don't know what's going on. And I was trying to journal. Journaling didn't work out at all because, like, my mom would just take the journal and read it and be like, now you're in trouble for writing about me. So I was trying to journal on, like, my tablet, and my mom was mad because I wasn't listening to her. So she tried to take the tablet from me. So she was just being all extra, She didn't know if she wanted to fight me again. She didn't know if she wanted to. She called my brother and my sister over to see if they can make me listen. Like, she just did not know what she was doing, honestly. As an adult, I'm not a parent, but she was making all the wrong moves in this situation. She did not know what she was doing. She was not prepared. And so she and I got into it because I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know why she was mad. It felt purely like an ego thing for her. Like, you disrespecting me, I need to put you in your place. Whereas on my end, I'm like, I am spiraling. Leave me alone. You're making it worse. Yeah, so then it ended up with me being in the kitchen and being like, you know what? I'm going to take this knife. I got to end it. I got to do it. Grabbing a knife. It was this weird war within me because it was like, on one hand, there was this voice that was like, do it, do it, do it. And then there was this voice that was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I was kind of having this whole struggle while they were like yelling at me. So I kind of did this thing where I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to start cutting now. I'm just going to start doing that. So I started doing that. And then my brother, he strong armed me and got the knife out of my hand. And then they spent the next hour or two, yelling at me while I cried and talked about how I didn't want to be alive anymore. And they didn't know how to handle that. So they just kept yelling at me. Yeah. And I mean, they were very uncomfortable too. And I'm sure it was very traumatic for my siblings as well. I'm not discounting their feelings. I'm just saying, like, from my perspective, you did everything wrong, And so I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm cutting now. We're doing this. And I would show it to people. I show it to my friends, which I have very few friends, and they were very terrible friends. Like, I had one friend who was like, you're not cutting right. You got to cut this way so you bleed more, and da-da-da-da-da. And so I didn't really have the right people around me at that time. But I was like, cutting, and like my doctors were seeing it. My teachers were seeing it. The counselor was seeing it. And I think that once that got to that point, and the doctors and them, like, they would tell my mom, like, she's hurting herself. Like, what are you doing? She's like, okay, I'll take you to a doctor. So she took me to this super far away, I feel like it took like an hour or two drive, doctor, psychologist. And so I went to him, this guy, it was another white guy. And I spoke to him about, how I've been feeling. I'm like, look, man, I just want to end it. Like, I'm sick of this. This life is stupid. I'm not having a good time. Like, I'm just ready to go. I feel like y'all getting in my way. Like, just let me make my own decision about what I want to do in my life. That's really how I felt. And he was like, can you go to this facility and talk to the person there? So I was like, facility? I was like, whatever, okay. So I get over there, and basically they explained to me, like, you could do a stay here where you stay here and you get help. And I was like, well, this is what I've been asking for this whole time. Yes, that's what I want. I want help. And so I literally told this woman, I was like, look, either I'm staying here or I'm not staying in this world. You know what I mean? Like, I'm about to go. I'm ready. I'm done. Like, either I'm gonna stay here and y'all gonna give me help, or I'm going home with my mom and I'm never coming back. Like, what? Make a decision, because I've made up my mind. So I was very straightforward with the lady, and so she was like, I think she did a whole thing where she was like, okay, you can go home now, but can you promise you won't hurt yourself? And I was like, no, I'm not promising that. Why would I promise that? No. I was like, no, I need to be here. I need to be taken away. Take me away. Make me stay here. I didn't think nothing about the price of it, which I found out later. Ooh. But basically they did this thing where they was like, they went to my mom and they was like, she needs to stay here, because if she doesn't and she is not alive anymore, we are going to blame you, because we're telling you now she needs to stay here. So my mom was really upset. She didn't want me to stay, but they was like, she needs to stay. So I ended up staying in this facility for about 2 weeks. It wasn't fun because it was kind of like this place where middle-class white parents were sending their kids who were acting up, you know. So it was kind of like, there was a girl there who was like smoking cigarettes, and her parents was like, you need to go to this mental health place. So they kind of treated me as if I was in a detention center instead of actually needing help. Now, the good thing about it, I was not at home. I had to do therapy like 3-4 times a day, you know, so I had to do group therapy all the time. I had to see the psychiatrist. They gave me some medication that they shouldn't have, and it caused me to pass out. And then they started giving me medication that I actually needed. And so it was really weird, because on one hand, you had the people who didn't really need to be there, like the people who were smoking cigarettes or their parents got them smoking weed. And then on the other hand, you had people who really did need to be there, like people who were schizophrenic, and the doctors they just was not doing what they needed to do with these kids. It was sad, but it was still good for me, because I was like, I'm away from home. But then after the 2 weeks was up, I was like, I can't be here anymore. These people are terrible. They treat you bad. They treat you like you're a problem, as opposed to actually trying to get the help that you needed. So I was like, I guess I'm going home now. And so they wouldn't let me go home until I like promised my mom that I was going to be good. You know, wash the dishes when she tells you to, take out the trash when she tells you to. That's literally what they made me do. And then they were like, okay, you can go home. And so mom came and got me, and we ended up going home. And I remember there was this whole beef between my mom and my dad about paying for it, because it was like $2,000. And my dad was mad because they didn't let him visit me. But honestly, it was more like had I been there longer, he would have. It was a very short time period where parents could actually visit their kids. So my mom ended up getting to visit me, and so my dad ended up not being able to visit me. If I was there longer, he would have been able to, but whatever. So they was fighting about who has to pay the bill and whatever. And my mom was talking about how she was so depressed that I was depressed. Well, not depressed that I was depressed. She was depressed that I was in a facility. Even coming back to school after that, like, people knew, like, everybody knew that I had a whole breakdown. They didn't know where I went, but I mean, like, I was crying in class. They knew what was up. And I didn't get better because I wasn't actually given any like proper medication other than Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic that helped me sleep, but it wasn't doing much for like my depression and stuff. And they did give me Zoloft for depression, but it wasn't working. And the the psychiatrist that they sent me to this time was a black woman. She did not care. And I'm not saying black people are bad mental health people. It's just that these are my experiences. And this shaped my thought process when it came to choosing a therapist later on. But it was just like, she did not care whether the meds were working or not. She just kept prescribing them. She didn't want to ask me how I was doing. I wasn't seeing a therapist when I got out of the facility. So I was still at this point where I was brought right back to this shitty situation where I'm still in the same home environment. No one cares about any diagnosis. And they diagnosed me with mood disorder. So that didn't even make any sense to anybody. No one cares about the diagnosis of mental illness. Teachers didn't really know much about it. I know my counselor and a couple teachers, they had talked because they were like, hey, we just stopped seeing her in school and we knew she was hurting herself. What's going on? But it was kind of like one of those things where everybody was just expected to go back to normal and pretend it never happened. And that's not what I needed. I needed there to be actual change. So I was still having problems in school. Like I had a little job working outside of the school at this food truck that I ended up quitting because it was just too much stress on me. Being in that toxic work environment. I can talk about that later. But basically the dude was a little perverted. Okay. And working with him was toxic. You know, being in school was toxic because of all the bullying and the teachers weren't doing anything. I kind of just checked out mentally in school. So, I mean, I was still making A's and everything, but I just kind of checked out. Like it was, fuck it, you know. And so I had to deal with that up until I went to college. And so when I got to college, there was a few things that happened. But the biggest thing was day one of classes. I was late to my class. I don't remember what time. I think it was like a 9 a.m. bio class. It was my first class and I was late. And I had no idea what to expect with college because I was the first person to go. So my thought was like, you late to class, don't even go. So I had a whole mental breakdown just from missing. I wouldn't have missed class if I just went anyway and he wouldn't have cared. But in my mind, it was like, it's the end of the world. You've already started college and you fucked up. So I had like a whole mental breakdown. I went into the counseling center because I knew about it. They had told us about it. And there was this black woman therapist there. And I think she was about to go on lunch or something. And I came in and I couldn't talk. Like I was just like, I'm out of it. You know, I was crying. I was hyperventilating. She was like, okay. Come sit down. Let's talk. So I started seeing her every week. And I at first didn't want to see her because I was like, oh, you're a black woman. And I've had all these terrible experiences with these black therapists. I didn't see a white person. But she had actually grown up in the same neighborhood as me, had the same situation with me as far as dealing with toxic black dysfunctional families. So she was actually very, very good at understanding what was happening to me and actually talking me through it. And she gave me the validation that I needed. So she was very helpful. And she also was good at connecting me with like the disability services. She helped me find a new psychiatrist to go to, one that actually gave me the diagnosis of bipolar disorder and got me on the right types of medication to help me actually be mentally good. And she was just really, really good. And she ended up leaving the college before I graduated. So I ended up seeing a white therapist who she recommended. But that was like the biggest turning point for me, was getting to see an actual therapist, because I didn't get one after I left the facility. So for a few years, I just didn't see a therapist. I was just taking medication. And then getting to see an actual psychiatrist who happened to be a black man. We don't agree on a lot of stuff family wise, but he cares a lot about me. And so I still go to him, and I've been seeing him for years. But he actually was the one who diagnosed me with bipolar disorder and said, let's work on your medication combinations. Because a large part of, I would say between 16 and maybe 19 or 20, I was sleeping 12 hours a night by the medication that the facility put me on. And so he was working with me on reducing that so that I could actually function as a college student, because if a college student, you're only awake 12 hours a day. It's not easy. It's not easy to go through college like that. But he was very, very receptive to it. And it was very helpful for me to not have to worry about driving, because I didn't have a car, driving to find a therapist, paying for therapy services. I was seeing the therapist at college for free. And then I only had to see the psychiatrist, every 3 months. But he was also very available whenever I had problems or I needed to up my medication or lower my medication. He was very, very willing to talk with me and meet with me. He communicated with my therapist. It was everything that I should have had when I was in elementary. I should have had therapy and psychiatry, and maybe my life wouldn't have been so shitty. Maybe I wouldn't have had to go through these periods where I was ready to just end everything on multiple occasions. Maybe I would have realized that my friendships were toxic. Maybe I would have realized that That job that I had in high school was toxic. You know, there was a point with the therapist when I was in high school that I was seeing the white woman where she was like, well, let's bring your mom in. Brought my mom in, and after that, that therapist was like, don't bring her back. It was not a fun therapy session. And when I was in college and I was seeing the black woman therapist, I was like, well, do you want to meet my mom? And she was like, no. Don't want to meet her. There's no point in bringing her here. We can't help her. We gonna help you, but we can't help her. And I was like, yeah. But I thought it'd be good to get this out and talk about it. And even though it's very, very stressful to talk about this and how I feel, I thought it was important. Like today, I definitely feel like my bipolar disorder is under control. I take medication. I still take Seroquel that helps me sleep at night because my thoughts do race from stress. I don't take depression medication anymore. I don't need it. The Seroquel really helps calm down everything. I do take medication for anxiety now, but that's a new thing. And I'm still seeing the same psychiatrist I started seeing in college because he is very, very receptive to any changes, anything that I need, you know, if I need more, if I need less, like he's very receptive and he's willing to work with me. He's willing to work with my therapist, and the therapists, really, they're the ones who see me like every week. So he's willing to listen to them and work with them. So I feel like that's been under control. I mean, as far as my stress and anxiety, that's another thing, but the bipolar disorder is under control. I don't feel, you know, the impulsiveness. I don't have episodes where I, you know, spend a bunch of money that I shouldn't be spending, or I eat things that I shouldn't be eating, or I do things that I shouldn't be doing. My depression is mostly under control. I have had situations where I've started to slip in depression over the past few years, and my therapist, because I see them so often, have always been good at catching it early and helping me do things that can keep me from slipping into that spiral. And so therapy and psychiatry, like that's really been my saving grace, because they can catch these things before you even catch them. Like you might start feeling a little bit down before you even get depressed, and they're like helping you work yourself through that and work with them. And you have that person who's unbiased, who's never going to tell anything that you say to your family members. You can just be yourself with them, and they're very validating. My therapist today is a white woman, and it just happened like that because the therapist that I was seeing after the black woman therapist, she connected me to another white woman who connected me to another white woman. And then when I graduated, they was like, see this white woman. So that's just kind of how it ended up. I feel like when you're dealing with a black dysfunctional family, it does help to see a white therapist simply because they have a different perspective. I feel like the times that I did see a black therapist or a black psychiatrist outside of that one woman in college, they kind of had the perspective of, yeah, you're disrespectful. You know, your mom worked so hard to put food on the table and support you. And they kind of just turn it back on you like you're a bad person for putting your mom through all of this when really you're the one going through it. Whereas the white psychiatrist and the white therapist, they kind of come from the perspective of, this is about you and this is about helping you. And the things that go on in your family are not good. And I know some people might be like, how dare this white person tell you about your family? I live in a very dysfunctional family. My family is dysfunctional and they are toxic. I don't care if some of those toxic traits are a part of black culture or not. If it's toxic, it's toxic. If it's hurting me, it's hurting me. So it doesn't matter, like, you know, what she says about, like, and she's not trying to take my family and change them in any way. She's trying to help me understand that what happened to me is real. You know, what I'm going through is real. And these are things that I can do to make myself healthier. That's really what it is. It's got nothing to do with her trying to make judgments about black people and black culture. So don't even go there. I know it may have seemed like I was missing some details, but I'm going to talk about trauma in another video. So I really wanted to speak a lot about kind of like my experiences with bipolar disorder and the depression and the mania. I didn't have as much mania outside of I had periods where I didn't sleep, periods where I just kind of felt like everything was too much. I was up here, I was at a 10 all the time. And, I couldn't really control myself as far as, like spending money or being irritable or my thoughts racing, just feeling like I was on 10 the whole time. But as far as just looking back in my past, the depression was there for a long time before the mania reared its ugly head. And I think that if I had gotten help then, the help that I needed, my life would have went a completely different way. But everything happens for a reason. Your life goes the way it goes for a reason. Maybe it's better that I went through life this way because today I'm a much more well-adjusted adult. I have a better understanding of how my family is. I can interact with some of my family members. But I still do have family members who are like, nothing was ever wrong with you. You were just a bad kid. You just needed a kick in the butt. You just needed tough love. I don't talk to those people. I'm very much, I own that I, have bipolar disorder. I own that I have anxiety. I own that I have, trauma and issues with that. Like, I own that because that's me. And the only thing I can do is control how I feel. I can control my narrative. I cannot control their narrative or how they feel. But I'm not going to let them disrespect me and tell me that what I felt wasn't real, because it is. So when they try, I shut them down like, you don't know, and you don't want to know, period. But I think that my family now seeing that I'm so much better now, or even when I was in college, seeing that I was so much better, that kind of triggered to them like, oh, maybe she did need the therapy and the psychiatry because she got that and now she's better. Oh, what a surprise. So I think they've come to accept it more. But some people still ain't too much into it. Like, I think my mom came to accept it more. She became more worried that I was actually schizophrenic. And so that was something she focused on until I came out as asexual. And then that was something for her to focus on. My sister has become much more open with me about like her struggles with mental illness. And we've grown a lot closer because she's opened up to me about how she feels. And we've talked more about our family and how dysfunctional the family is and how there is probably a lot more mental illness in the family than our family would like to admit. And it just goes unnoticed because we don't go to therapy. And I can't control them and I can't make them go to therapy. But any friend that I have, any person that I talk to who struggles with anything, whether it's a relationship or whether it's their own feelings and emotions, I always encourage them to go to therapy. A lot of people who grew up in families like mine feel like they can't go to therapy. They can't because they're afraid that their like family will find out. And I actually help them. I guide them. I talk to my therapist. I get their network. I find out what their insurance is. And we help them start seeing a therapist so that they can start getting the help they need, because it's a lot easier than you think. And I mean, going through therapy and processing traumas or, bad situations is not that easy, but actually getting to a therapist is a lot more easier. And even now where we're in this area where everything is virtual, it's even easier because you can see people, you could talk to your therapist on the phone instead of having to physically go there. So it's a lot easier today than it used to be. Even if you're a teen, it's like I had to scrounge up money, or like I had that little job with the food truck where I would have to scrounge up money to pay that copay, but I was still able to use my parents' insurance. Now, if my mom was one of them people who understood insurance better, she might have been, more like, oh, who is this you went to? But she wasn't. My dad didn't pay attention to what I was using his insurance for. I had his insurance. I used it. And I just encourage anybody who's struggling with anything, or you don't even have to be struggling with anything. I know some people who don't think that they have anything wrong in their life and everything's great. God bless them. They're great. And I'm like, you still should go to therapy. Do it. Just do it. And the first person you find might not work out, go to the next person. Just people have no idea how much of a happier, more well-adjusted adult you can be by going to therapy, whether you struggle with your job, whether you struggle with your time management skills, whether you struggle with stress. Like, the therapist can help you with that. And if you find a therapist that works for you, it's amazing. Come on now. Yeah, I know this. Yeah, I know this. I feel like we've become much more aware of people's mental health since the pandemic started. Um, Take this opportunity to do something for yourself. Like I tell people in my family, the best thing you can do for yourself as a parent is go to therapy. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. It's the best thing you can do for your kids, because you learn how to be a better you. And if you're a better you, you're a better parent, you're a better sibling, you're a better, you're a better worker, you're a better student. Like everything gets better when you get these tools and these skills from seeing a therapist on how to deal with, different stressors and issues in your life. It just is. But that's all I wanted to talk to about today. I feel like it's really good for me to like get all of this out. Especially now I've started going through trauma therapy, EMDR, and I'm going to be talking about these situations, and my way of talking about them is definitely going to change, because it's not going to affect me the way that it affects me now when I'm thinking about these traumatic things, or I'm thinking about, all these different things I've gone through. Oh my God, look at this bird. Look, you see that bird? Just out there doing it. So I definitely know that my thoughts and my feelings about how all of this went down is going to change. And I'm ready for it. I'm excited. I'm excited because I think it's definitely going to make me a better person. And it's probably going to help me a lot with like my stress and anxiety as well. So if I know this is kind of more of a serious video, but if you stuck around this long, thank you. And if you have any similar experiences that you want to share, please share them down in the comment section. It's nice to know that other people go through similar things. And it's nice to share your thoughts, your opinions, your experiences with other like-minded people. But that's all I'm going to do it for today. I am going to go eat some Mexican food, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day, and I'm going to see you guys in the next video. All right. Bye.